Good evening, and welcome to tonight's episode of Wanderlust Wednesdays. This entire week we are talking about Egypt. I would recommend that on Friday you watch my friend Khaled, who's live from Cairo. Today I have with me the gentleman who took the vision that Tor and Karina had for what a Viking ship should look like and turned it into reality. His name is Richard Riveire. He's here with me tonight, and we're going to answer some questions after we present. Richard?
Hey, good evening, Joost. It's great to see you virtually. I'd like to come to Switzerland and see you in real, but welcome anyway from sunny Southern California. It's really nice to be here with you. We have prepared a couple of presentations that I hope people will enjoy, and we'll see you back in about 40 minutes for some questions and answers.
On this intriguing 12-day itinerary, you can immerse yourself in ancient secrets, long buried in desert sands, while enjoying the welcoming culture of Egypt as you explore with Viking. Your journey begins with a 3-night stay in Cairo, the cradle of civilization, during which you can gaze upon the world's oldest step pyramid at Saqqara, the Great Pyramids, the stunning Sphinx, and enjoy Cairo's Museum of Egyptian Antiquities. You'll also have ample time to check out the city on your own. Luxor is next, unfolding before you for 2 amazing days. Satisfy your curiosity at the great temples of Luxor and Karnak, and the remarkable Valley of the Kings. Here you'll enjoy privileged access to the tomb of Queen Nefertiri, an exquisitely preserved site only a few visitors have the chance to see. In Cana, discover the sprawling complex of Dendera and its fascinating Temple of Hathor. Built by the Ptolemies and Romans in classic Egyptian style, it's one of Egypt's best preserved and less frequented temples. Isna is home to the red sandstone temple of Khnum, the 1st century hypostyle hall filled with intricately carved columns and detailed hieroglyphics. You'll sail on to Aswan and the serene Philae Sanctuary. This oasis was rescued from the rising waters of the Aswan Dam and is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Or set out for Abu Simbel on an optional excursion to admire the great temple of Ramses II. A picturesque voyage along the Nile River brings you to Edfu, where you'll visit the Temple of Horus, the falcon god. It's one of Egypt's best preserved temples and an impressive remnant of the Ptolemaic dynasty. Your exotic Viking journey concludes back in Cairo, with free time to explore more of Egypt's intriguing culture.
Okay, and after that brief introduction, let's dive into it, shall we? So you arrive in Cairo on day 1, and you spend the subsequent 3 nights there. So that gives you a full 2 days in Cairo to really explore everything that great city has to offer. Then on day 4, you fly to Luxor, and that's when you board your ship. And before you really set sail on the Nile, you spend time in Luxor because there's an awful lot to see there. And then in Cana, Esna, Aswan, Edfu, that's when you're actually cruising on the Nile. On day 11, you finally get back to Luxor. You fly back to Cairo. You spend 1 overnight in that city before you then go on your return flight home, or you extend towards Jordan. And speaking of extensions, there are 2 ways in which you can extend your experience with us before you start cruising in Egypt. The first one is our very classic extension to the Holy Land. You spend 4 nights in Jerusalem, and there's no other city like it really in the world. If you haven't been to Israel, and if you're traveling to this corner of the world, you really must go to Jerusalem. It's a holy city in the traditions of Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. And there are literally centuries of history piled into what is really a relatively small area. There's a Jewish quarter, there's a Christian quarter, there is a Muslim quarter. You will see the church in Bethlehem. You will see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre that now occupies the site of the Calvary. You have an opportunity to visit Yad Vashem, the Israeli memorial to the victims of the Holocaust. And you will experience this very, very vibrant city with lots of great restaurants, with cafes, with very colorful shops. You will be able to see the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's really an all-around experience in one of my absolute favorite cities in the world. The second option for a pre-extension focuses on the 19th century collections of ancient Egyptian art that were put together by private British citizens, people that sometimes traveled the world to explore or sometimes spent money for others to do so. One of these was the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, and the 5th Earl of Carnarvon, of course, lived in Highclere Castle. And Highclere today is still a place that has a small private collection from the Earl that exemplifies how private people were so interested in everything that the world had to offer, and particularly exotic places like Egypt. The Earl spent money on expeditions that Howard Carter carried out, and Howard Carter, of course, became the man who unearthed the tomb of Tutankhamun. There are a lot of other museums, small museums, some very big, the British Museum in London, but we also take you to the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, the Griffith Institute, the Petrie Museum in London, and all of these are just such perfect examples of the fascination that the 19th century in England had for ancient Egypt. Now we're looking at a map, and Egypt is certainly a country that is a little bit more exotic maybe than much of Europe. And so this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about these very practical travel tips. For instance, when it comes to your money, the currency in Egypt is the Egyptian pound. And you can get Egyptian pounds in ATMs that are not all that plentiful, but you don't need to go through the trouble of getting the money before you travel. There is enough opportunity to get some Egyptian pounds, especially smaller amounts in dollars are also okay. What you should do before you travel is let your bank know. The first time that you charge something by card in Egypt may trigger a response from your bank. So let them know that you're traveling and where you are. It's a good way to start your trip without having that headache. Bring small packages of tissues in washrooms, antibacterial hand wipes. A currency converter may be very practical in the hotel. Of course, you will not need those on the ship. Visas are required for Egypt and for Jordan and for Israel. Check before you travel. Viking can help you obtain these visas. For both Egypt and for Jordan, it's very, very easy to get these upon arrival. And generally, the agents that we work with will whisk you through that process in no time at all. So those are two visas that you don't really have to worry about. If you want the peace of mind, you can certainly do it through Viking before you travel. It's probably going to be a little bit more expensive to do it that way. As far as your clothing is concerned, you want loose-fitting clothing. It can be quite hot, even though we don't travel in June and July when it's really at the hottest. But you should always make sure that you have a little bit of air around you. The other thing is wear clothing with long sleeves. Women should cover their heads when they go into religious buildings, and generally comfortable shoes. I would not recommend sandals because the sand really gets you everywhere. It's much better to have comfortable shoes with good breathable socks. This slide shows you Viking Osiris, and later on we will have a talk with Richard Riveire, the man who was responsible for the interior and much of the overall experience on the ship. Now let me take you through the itinerary port by port. And we start in Cairo. You will arrive there in one of the largest cities in the world. And it's going to be a little hectic at the airport, but you'll have people there from the moment you land to take you through all this. And then in the evening, you can settle into your hotel. Generally, you tend to arrive in the late afternoon or early evening, and you have a night there, and you're ready the next day to start exploring. And the first exploration takes place just south of Cairo, and you will see the stepped pyramid of Saqqara. That is one of the earlier pyramids. There are some nearby temples that are quite phenomenal, and you'll start to develop a taste for the Egyptian artwork that is on all the walls. It's quite often either in frescoes, wall paintings if you will, but also in very shallow carvings. And it might look at times that you're going from one temple to another. It never gets boring. In the afternoon, after lunch, you will visit the Great Pyramids. And you see in the picture that we have some camels there lined up in front of the pyramids. Part of the fun, of course, is to spend a little bit of time on a ship of the desert. This is something that you can do or you can leave. It's quite an experience. We have them there. The animals are very docile, and it is great fun. The pyramids themselves are enormous, and you really need to spend some time just sitting there or standing there, looking at them, letting it sink in how old these are, how enormous they are, and how perfect they are. And virtually right around the corner from the pyramids is the Sphinx, this very enigmatic statue, half man, half beast, that looks forever towards the east. And after your visit to the Sphinx, you return to your hotel for dinner and to relax and to recover a little bit, because that first day is so full of impressions that I think you'll need an early night to bed. The next day, there are a total of 3 things that you can do. First of all, we'll give you a little bit of a tour of the city, and the focal point there is the Mosque of Muhammad Ali. It's an enormous mosque on the edge of the old city. It sits on a hill, so you have a splendid view all over Cairo. And after that, you'll visit the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities. That is in the downtown area, and that is where the nation's collection of Egyptian art from the period of the pyramids all the way through the last of the pharaohs and the early Romans is kept and is on display. And until the Grand Egyptian Museum is opened, which is next to the pyramids, and that is likely not to happen until 2021, and it may even be a little later, but until that time, that vast collection is still on display in the original museum, which is smack dab in the middle of the city. Not far from there, and this is for the afternoon, or for the late afternoon if you so will, is the Bazaar of Khan el-Khalili, which is a warren of small little streets with shop after shop after cafe after shop after cafe. It's very busy. It's not for the faint-hearted, but it is absolutely something that you will enjoy. Whether you buy things or not, people will certainly try to sell you things, but no one ever gets in your face. The bartering is very elegant. It's very friendly, and people understand it if you don't really want to buy anything and just look. It's really part of the experience. And dinner is served if you choose to go with us on an optional excursion there, with a guide who can explain to you what's what to buy, what not to buy, what are reasonable prices, what are unreasonable prices, and so on and so forth. And then again, have maybe a somewhat early night. You'll be tired. The next day, you're off to Luxor and off to your ship. You'll have 2 days in Luxor to explore everything that city has to offer. And for 1,500 years, this was the center of Egyptian civilization. And so there are layers upon layers upon layers of archaeological finds, of temples, of monuments, of archaeological digs that are on display in Luxor. It is an open air museum. It's one of the most magnificent and one of the most wonderful places in the world. And on top of that sits a modern city with mosques, with obelisks, with little carriages that will take you from A to B, and with a lot of ships that start their cruises on the Nile right here. And you also see quite a few feluccas. That is for later in Aswan, but these are the very typical ships, the sailing ships that you find on the Nile. So a busy city, but not nearly as busy as Cairo. You'll have a chance to breathe a little bit. And the great thing about having a few nights in Luxor is that it allows you to have an evening visit to one of the temples. It also allows you an early morning riser with a balloon over the Valley of the Gods. So the first day in Luxor is spent with the temples of Luxor and Karnak. And you also visit the Historical Institute in Luxor that details a lot of the background information that helps you interpret the temples and understand the sculptures and the artwork that you get to see there. This slide shows the two colossi of Memnon, and those are on the west bank of the Nile. The west bank is where you find the Valley of the Kings and the Valley of the Queens. And in these valleys, this is where people like Howard Carter found these tombs, unearthed them, dug for them, searched for them for years sometimes, until they eventually struck literal gold with something like the tomb of Tutankhamun. There is also the tomb of Queen Nefertari, which is normally not all that accessible to the public, but we've made special arrangements for our guests to visit that tomb. Photography, this is just one small little thing that just shows you how delicate and how unique these temples are. Photography is not allowed inside of these temples, and that's just to make sure that they maintain these very, very fragile murals for generations to come. The lighting in the tombs generally tends to be quite low. The lights are only switched on when there are people in the temples, and there is a system, and it's sometimes a system that's not all that easy to understand, but there's a system that opens and closes these temples as needed to make sure that there's never too much traffic in them. And here you see one of these hot air balloons in the sunrise hovering over one of the temples around Luxor. Once you set sail from Luxor, you first travel a little bit downriver. That means north. Just north of Luxor is the city of Kraina, and near Kraina is the temple of Dendara. This is a temple that doesn't get visited all that much because it's not on the, if you will, the traditional circuit between Luxor and Aswan. But because we have quite a bit of time on this itinerary, we have included it to see one of the latest temples that was built. This was one that was built in the waning days of the Egyptian dynasties, when the Romans already had quite a bit of influence in Egypt. Day 7 finds you in Esna. And at this point, you have two options. You can visit the temple there. This is again a Ptolemaic temple. That means it's a temple that was built about 2,000 years ago, which in Egypt, surprisingly, is relatively young. Or you can join a local guide to visit the market, to visit the rest of the town. If you feel that you need a break of old and ancient Egypt and you want to take a peek into everyday, daily 21st century Egypt, that is what you want to do on that walking tour of Esna. Day 8 finds you in Aswan. And this is about as far as the ship can go, because just south of Aswan is the enormous dam that has created a lake, which was needed early in the 20th century or mid in the 20th century to provide electricity for millions of Egyptians. So Aswan is a turning point. Aswan is also a place that has an awful lot to offer. This is where you can have a felucca ride on the Nile. Feluccas are the ships with the small triangular sails. It's really very much part of the culture on the river itself. You will visit a local market. You also have the opportunity here to fly to the temple of Abu Simbel, and that is the classic Egyptian temple that was moved when they built Aswan Dam to a location where the sculptures and the statues of the pharaohs could keep their feet dry. It's a very, very iconic, probably the best known temple in Egypt. Finally, in Aswan, you have the opportunity to see Philae Temple in the evening during a sound and light show. And if that sounds a little on the tacky side, I can assure you that the Egyptians have this down to an art. The temples, to visit them in the evening is such a different experience than to do it at night. So I warmly recommend that. Generally I'm not a big fan of these things. In Egypt, I don't miss out on an opportunity to go to one of those sound and light shows because they are spectacular and they're really well done. I want to use this slide to just comment real quickly on the gentleman that you see on the left-hand side. All of our guides in Egypt are trained Egyptologists. To become a guide in Egypt is somewhat of a badge of honor. These are people that are steeped in thousands of years of history, and they take their jobs very, very seriously. They do it with an awful lot of pride. They do it with an awful lot of joy. They're incredible ambassadors of their country, and they're among the most knowledgeable guides you will find anywhere in the world. On day 9, you still spend the morning in Aswan, but then you start to travel to Komombo. And Komombo has a temple that is dedicated to both Horus and Sobek, two gods that play an important role in Egyptian mythology. And they're both characters that you will also find in other temples. The next day, you go to Edfu, which has an incredibly massive temple. It almost looks like a fortress. And then if you look at the next slide, here it is, that shows you what Horus looks like. Horus is generally shown as a falcon. So once you return to Luxor, it's a quick little plane ride to Cairo, and that's where you spend your last night. These are some images to show the Mosque of Muhammad Ali, to show the Sofitel Hotel on an island in the Nile. The Sofitel is one of the hotels we use. It may or may not be your specific hotel, but we do make sure that whatever hotel we pick for you is of an excellent quality, has good surroundings, a little bit of room to walk around, and obviously all the facilities that you would expect from a great hotel in a city like Cairo. So from Cairo, you could fly home, and you already know what's coming now. You really have to go to Jordan after this. In Jordan, we have created an extension that focuses on the highlights. On Petra, you will walk through this very narrow canyon, the Siq, to arrive at the treasury that was carved out in the rocks by the ancient Nabateans. You will see a lot of other monuments in the old city of Petra. We will take you to Jerash, that has incredible Greek and Roman ruins. You will see Amman, the capital of Jordan, and one of my personal favorites, you will spend some time at the Dead Sea. That is so salty that you could sit in it and you will float. No swimming needed. It's one of those natural miracles that you read about when you grow up as a child, and it's right there. Really, again, one of my very favorite experiences. I would do both, either the London extension with the Egyptian museums or Jerusalem. I would certainly also do Jordan. It's while you're in that part of the world, you may not come back, and they're just such stellar experiences, very much in their own right, that you shouldn't miss out. During my presentation, you have seen some images of our new ships on the Nile. And it now gives me great pleasure to introduce the gentleman who was responsible for the design of these ships. The gentleman who has reinvented the interior of our river ships, who has given shape to what the experience is like on an ocean vessel with Viking, who will soon introduce you to what a ship looks like when you go on a Viking expedition. And he's also done our Egypt ships. And it gives me, again, great pleasure to introduce Richard Riveire to you. He will be talking a little bit about how he has envisioned these ships, and after that, we will be back to answer your questions.
Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Richard Riveire with the design firm Rote Studio. Now, some of you may know me from meeting on board one of Viking ships around the world or through some of these chats. But for those that don't, I have the great privilege of working with Viking to design new ships. Today, I've been asked to talk a bit about the new Viking Osiris and her sister ship, the Aton, both destined to sail on the Nile. One of the greatest opportunities an architect can have is to develop a complete brand image for a company. The opportunity to work with Thorsten Hagen to develop Viking's look has been an amazing experience. We started with longships sailing in Europe's waterways, and we've now literally gone all around the world. Some of you may have sailed on one of our ocean ships, or looking forward perhaps to sailing on the Mississippi or on one of the new expedition ships. Yet, no matter where they sail, all Viking ships everywhere have 5 big design ideas in common. First, celebrating Nordic heritage with the history and the culture of Scandinavia and Norway in particular. And that comes in a host of different ways. Some of you have seen references to the Norse pantheon of gods, or to knitting patterns or other things having to do with more modern day culture of Norway. But Norway is in something a little bit of everything that we do. Second is residential modernism. You know, it's a style, it's an architecture, it's a design ideal, but what it is clean and straightforward design, but done from the perspective of a beautiful residence. So we obviously are interested in both beauty and in comfort. And third, a sense of craft and non-industrial materials. Now, ships are big ocean and water going machines, and we do like to look at things on the inside that contrast with that a bit to give you a sense, again, of things that are put together by hand. Fourth are references to nature in all facets, ranging from the waters that we sail on to the terrain and animals of our destinations, and sometimes even to the sky above. And last, the idea of exploring the world, and that comes in all sorts of facets as well. So each ship in the fleet has all 5 elements to a degree. Now, some are more prominent than others. And particularly interesting about our Nile ships is the thinking about how do we integrate that Nordic heritage and how should that be expressed? And of course, on the Nile, we want to also capture the flavor of both Egyptian antiquity and the modern Islamic world. One of the greatest pleasures of working with Viking is seeing so many different parts of the world, and Egypt is a singularly interesting and special place. It is a truly fascinating part of the world and quite thought-provoking from a design perspective. So apart from amazing monuments and the culture of modern Egypt, the sheer geography also represents opportunities and challenges. Now, the Nile, for those who haven't been there, is very broad. It's a big river, and the shore is lush and green for about 5 meters. And then after that, it is broad expanses of sand. Now, so think of the sweeping cinematic panoramas in Lawrence of Arabia, and you get the idea. Now, the sun is really brilliant coming off of the desert, but the light off of the Nile can also be very refreshing. So that's an interesting challenge. The side-by-side nature of these 2 different terrains really creates a compelling dynamic. But in thinking about the design for that, we want to consider how to let the eye rest. How do you manage the change from the bright sunlight to cool interior spaces while not losing the view or losing, the enjoyment of the interior space? We are, after all, talking about how to explore the world in comfort. So I think you'll see that we've managed to let our guests focus on the views outside and to relax inside of a great ship. Next, we thought about the intersection of Viking with the culture and the aesthetics of Egypt. Now, Norwegians have been some of the world's foremost explorers, and we've looked at a lot of those in various parts of our other ships. So these explorers, as we know, have traveled to all parts of the world. So incorporating our Nordic heritage was not so hard after all, right? But to enforce this, there is the English tradition of the Grand Tour, which began in the 18th century and lasted until the 1930s. And that was, of course, when young people would leave home and spend that gap year between, school and going off to university or going on to business. And they would go throughout Europe and frankly, all the way to Egypt and look at the great monuments of the world. So this is the perfect analogy to Vikings exploring the world in comfort. This romantic ideal of traveling through unknown lands as an intrepid explorer while taking along all the travel-friendly comforts of home, that fits right into our wheelhouse, if you forgive the pun. I think you'll get a sense of that expeditionary concept as you look at the ship, particularly in some of the design details on board. Let's take a look at the design. First, Viking Osiris and Aton are custom built for the Nile, including everything that we've learned about ship design. And of course, it's to be the best experience sailing on the Nile. So these ships were designed from scratch to provide an environment that is not only perfect for exploring Egypt's greatest river, but also to be a great hotel experience as well. Of course, these are river ships, and they look like Viking river ships with the signature bow and livery. I think they'll look very familiar to you. I think you'll also find that there are references throughout the vessels to the materials and detailing that is so well recognized as the Viking brand image. Now, a distinctive trait about these ships is that they're even more intimate and comfortable than our European longships. Only 82 passengers. And they also provide an extremely expansive amount of public space to enjoy. We have 4 decks. So one more than the European longships. So there's frankly a lot more room for the architect to play a bit to provide really wonderful spaces for you to enjoy. And we've taken all the things that work so well on the European longships and on the ocean ships, and we've taken that knowledge, banded it together, and elevated all those concepts to the next level. So whether it's a great hotel or a cruise ship, the point where you arrive and see your new home for the first time needs to be a memorable experience. I also believe we need to give our guests a sense of how the ship is organized, while also delighting with a sense of excitement for things to come. Then, the cardinal rule in hotel architecture is the idea of surprise and delight. So we want to make sure we don't lose any of that. And there are, I promise, surprises on board that I think are really delightful. So now, to my mind, there is nothing worse than arriving at a hotel somewhere and not being able to find the reception desk or the elevators. Badly designed hotels make me crazy. Now, on this ship, we want to make sure that we do find our clean and simple design that we talked about earlier. Our long ships have an atrium at the midships embarkation point, and it's the same here, but we've taken and really expanded that. The Osiris's atrium is 1 full deck taller, making for a much larger space. It's completely open on both sides, so we literally almost can see through the ship. And there are very large skylights at the top, so that gives this light-filled, wonderful, expansive space as your first welcome on board the ship. After that, an open 4-deck stair connects everything. And we've punched a lot of holes in the floor, quite frankly, where you can look up and see everything around you. So the restaurant, the library, the lounge, shops, all that stuff are all arranged on different levels surrounding these 2 large openings in the middle of the ship. As you come on board, you're going to get this great sense of what the ship is about, how big it is, how light-filled that it is, and how comfortable it is. Now, when you get into that space, you're probably going to notice the big 4 stone pilasters on the forward side that connect all of the decks. Now, for those of you who've traveled on board the long ships, these may look vaguely familiar to you. We have something kind of like it at the stair and the atrium on the long ships. Now, the stone, beautiful material for sure, but it's also a nod to the architectural rhythms of classical Egyptian architecture. So, rhythm is one of the things the ancient Egyptians really used to great advantage to broaden vistas, to really provide a sense of drama and expansiveness. You can think of the lines of Sphinx outside various Egyptian cities, the lines of obelisks in the middle of European piazzas, or the 4 statues of Ramses II at Abu Simbel. That rhythm, that sense of the material, and frankly, the sense of height are all things that are pretty direct allusions to the way Egyptian architecture works. As we move to the restaurant, there is another significant reference to the local culture, this time to more recent Egyptian history, the palm crate. Now, this is something you see a great deal in modern Egypt, but it was visible as far back as 19th century representations of Egyptian markets. You do see these on the streets today. The palm crate is the most abundant, multi-purpose, and widely used container in Egypt. Now, from simple fruit and vegetable basket to bird cage or chicken coop to display table, it's used in markets as a storage basket or as a transportation case. You can see them hung on bicycles or motorbikes or on the back of a donkey or a camel. The European longships in the restaurants use a metaphor of a surrounding wood grillage to visually hold the restaurant together. On the Osiris and the Aton, we combined these two thoughts and created the restaurant as contained within a palm crate. For sure, it's been changed, modified, and it's a design illusion, if you will, but these series of wood panels, beams, and posts that really do serve to both provide an intimate environment, to emphasize that sense of enclosure without obstructing any of the views outside. Now, anyone who has traveled with Viking previously will find the cabins to be comfortably familiar, but updated specifically for the Nile. So most of our cabins look similar to, maybe call it a cross between what we have on the longships and what we have on the ocean ships, but they're going to be there, they're going to be recognizable, and they are larger. So this is really quite an opportunity to take advantage of the fact that the ship has fewer passengers. There are 2 spectacular Explorer suites forward on deck 3 as well. These are great. They have stunning views over the bow and, of course, off to both sides, and they each have a private balcony. I think they're pretty special places. Looking at our open deck areas, the Aquavit Terrace is an immensely popular venue on all of our ships. They're generally located in the most forward part of the ships, and they're a great venue for either sitting and looking at the river. We have rocking chairs on the front of our ships to give you that opportunity to sit and rock down the river, or they're great places for al fresco dining. Now, one of the things that surprised me in visiting Egypt is how very pleasant it can be to sit outdoors. We typically think of Egypt as sort of unbearably hot and everybody sits inside all the time. That's really not the case. Now, our Aquavit Terrace here, a little bit different than it is on the longships, that will be, I think, an incredible al fresco dining experience. It is completely covered and shaded, but it has extensive skylights, and the forward portion of it can be completely enclosed and air conditioned if that's what we need, or we can slide all the windows down and open up all the doors to the fresh air. And of course, we have a wonderful barbecue arrangement for those wonderful themed meals that our Viking chefs tend to prepare. So it's going to be a really great place, I think, to have a breakfast, lunch, or a good, interesting dinner. Now, just aft of the Aquavit Terrace's indoor-outdoor space is more open-air shaded lounge space. And so that'll be, I think, a comfortable place to sit, have a cocktail in the evenings, watch the rivers flow by. It's really kind of a really lovely place. And it is separated from, how am I going to say this? The shaded lounge space, there's a line of what I call fire brushes. They're amazing plant material that's very common in Egypt, and they look kind of like what they sound. I'm going to leave that one as a little bit of a surprise, but it's going to be quite a lovely experience. That separates us from an absolutely spectacular infinity edge pool that extends the full width of the ship. Now, for those who've been on the ocean ships, we have the infinity edge pool right at the very aft of the ship. This is positioned in that same place, but rather than being a sort of long, thin pool, this very much extends the full width of the ship, views to the side, views to the views aft. Really a spectacular arrangement for looking at the river. So designed for both a cooling soak as well as take advantage of those great views. I think this is going to be a really popular location. And last, the sun deck on the top of the ship is lovely. Now, this is one full deck up from the Aquavit Terrace and the Infinity Pool. So it's on the very top of the ship. So it has wonderful views, 360-degree views all the way around. We have trellises and tinted kind of canopy arrangements, lounge seating, and all the kind of wonderful things that you might hope to be able to spend time outdoors. Now, if I can share a story with you, one of my fondest memories is the evening where just after we had completed the Viking Raw. We were getting ready for passengers. The team had worked very, very hard putting everything together in exactly the right way. We got it done. We're ready to go for our guests to arrive the next day. The team had a celebratory drink and some nibbles, courtesy of Viking's terrific staff, out on the deck, out back around the pool. This was the height of summer, but it was a lovely time on the water with the candles lit, cool drinks, comfortable seating around the pool, great conversation, and the best of Viking hospitality. Really sticks in my memory as a truly wonderful Viking experience. So I hope that you're as excited about these ships as we are. I am personally very anxious to spend more time on the Nile, and I look forward to seeing all of you there. Thank you.
So, Heather, are you here to have questions for Richard and myself?
Yes, thank you, Joost. So our first question tonight comes from Mark in Fort Lauderdale. So Mark says, we are booked on the April 2023 Egypt itinerary with Viking, which will be their 17th Viking adventure. His question is, will they be able to visit the new Grand Egyptian Museum?
Very likely, yes. And I need to qualify that. The Grand Egyptian Museum, the building itself, the last time I saw it was quite a few years ago, and it was supposed to open the year after. So it's a project that has taken very long, but by spring of 2023, it should finally be finished. In the meantime, they have a very clever system in making sure that wherever the building is, the best things to see in the museum are on display. And yes, the Egyptian Antiquities Museum, it's getting a little in the years, and it's a little crowded sometimes, but you will not miss out on any of the artifacts, no matter where you go.
Great, thank you, Joost. Our next question is one for Richard, I think, and it comes from Casey in Corinth in Texas. She says, can you tell us a little bit more about the process of designing the ships? Do you start with the exterior and then work on the inside, or do you have a vision for the interior and then build the ship around it?
Well, Katie, that's a really great question. The answer is both. We actually start with sort of an outline of what the ship needs to do, how big it's going to be, how many cabins, that type of thing. And then we really do work on the interiors first, trying to go through the experience that we want our guests to follow. And then we sort of manage the ship around that. So it's kind of a hand in glove arrangement. I think, as you've seen from the presentations, things like the big atrium, the way the pool works, all of those things very definitely affected the exterior of the ship.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Barbara in Niagara Falls in Canada. She says, I'm taking this trip and the extension to Jordan and Petra. What currency would you recommend I carry?
Carry dollars, small dollar bills. Any money that you would you don't need to get any local money. You will be able to get to an ATM at a point where you can still make use of whatever money you get out. More and more people will accept credit cards as well. I wouldn't worry about it too much to get your Jordanian currency or your Egyptian currency, for that matter. You will be able to do it there.
Thank you. Our next question is from Ruby in Flower Mound. She says, we're interested in this itinerary and considering which stateroom to choose. Can you talk us through the differences in the categories? We like the idea of having a private veranda, but wonder if it may be too hot to spend much time outside.
Well, and from my opinion, first of all of the staterooms are great. I think whatever choice you'd like to make is going to really work well for you. The real thing to think about, though, is that the ship actually has a great deal of exterior space available. So, if you decide you want to spend more of your time outside, and by the way, Egypt is a really lovely place to be outside for a good part of the day. I wouldn't worry too much about that. But if you decide you want to spend some time outside, you certainly can. There are lots of places to go and do that. The private balcony is obviously really lovely and a nice place to be as well.
Great, thank you very much, Richard. Our next question is from Bob. He says, we've been on the Pharaohs and Pyramids trip just a year ago. Any plans to develop a short trip to Al Ula, the Nabatean sister site to Petra in Saudi Arabia?
There are every once in a while plans. Saudi Arabia is more of a midterm, that's 3, 4, 5 years away, I think.
Great, thank you. Our next question is from Vernon in Seattle. He says, are there any yet to be undiscovered royal tombs, do you think?
Yes. They're still finding. I mean, it's such an incredibly rich culture, and there's thousands of years of history under your feet. So there's still work being done. There's still excavations going on. Everyone, of course, is hoping for the next big discovery. I think those probably are somewhat unlikely, but as we speak, there are still lots of discoveries being made. Yeah, it's an evolving landscape.
Thank you. Our next question is from John in Spring Hill in the United States, and he says, can you tell us what is the difference between the Antares and our new ships?
The difference is that the new ships, of course, from the moment we cut the steel all the way to the very end, they're Viking ships. The Antares, we've had a lot of cooperation with our partners in Egypt, so it is a Viking experience. But I think the new ships take that to a whole new, different level.
Thank you, Joost. Next question comes from Wendell in Spokane, and he says, what I love about the Viking ocean ships is all the space and the feeling of always being able to find a quiet area to yourself. Has the Egypt ships been designed with the same idea in mind?
Oh yes, this is such a great question, because this goes really to the heart of how we think about the Viking experience and what it means to design a space like this for a holiday, for a resort. I tend to be of the philosophy that you want to have times when you want to be with other people, and you want big spaces that you have a sense of community and energy around you. But you also want those times that you can get away a little bit, that you can find that great little corner to sit and maybe read a book and feel like you're kind of immersed into the world around you. And so, yes, the short answer is just like we do on the ocean ships. There's lots of those types of spaces on the Osiris and the Aton where you can do that. Beautiful little library, sit, read a book, sit upstairs on the sun deck and enjoy the view as you go by, or be with your friends and new friends that you meet in the Aqua Terrace or the restaurant or the bar. So the answer is yes. A great question.
Thank you, Richard. A very specific question now from Tom in the United States. He says, can I take my trained service dog on board? She has done over 30 transatlantic voyages so far and been to Antarctica twice.
The short answer is yes. There is a procedure to be followed. We will want to see the dog's paperwork, and it's a fairly easy process. It's not difficult, but we follow a few steps, and then the answer is absolutely yes.
Thank you, Joost. Next question is from Rosella in Silver Spring. She says, I love reading books from the library when I travel with Viking. Will there be a library area on board the new ships?
Yeah. Oh, really lovely. Books are clearly some of my favorite things in the world. So we go there. Yes, we have a lovely partnership with Haywood Hill in London to go through our book arrangement. And yes, lovely library on board the Osiris, and with books as always that are topical to the location and things for a good shipboard read as well. So yes, absolutely, it's a fundamental part of the Viking experience.
Thank you, Richard. Next question comes from Anthony in the Villages in the United States. He says, is the custom of bakish, or what we'd call tipping for everything from toilet paper to whatever you name it, still in vogue in Egypt? He says, we went over a decade ago and we found we always needed tiny amounts of Egyptian coins for tipping for these various services.
Yes, but it's still done. How much you want to engage with that is entirely up to you. I mean, it's understood these days that these things are not always that easy. It's not that easy to walk around with small amounts of money, and not everyone is comfortable doing it. So it's fun if you want to engage with that part of the local culture. It's okay if it's something that you'd rather steer clear of a little bit, and no one really minds. It's a not a must. Certainly not a must.
Thank you, Joost. Muriel in California says, what local Egyptian foods would you recommend trying?
Omali. and someone in Cairo is smiling right now, because my friend Khaled, who introduced me to this many years ago, he's on Friday. It's basically Egyptian bread pudding. And that doesn't really do it justice at all. You just have to trust me. You need to order Omali when you have a chance. We will have it on the ship, or if you go into a restaurant in Cairo, just have that for dessert. It's a dessert.
I would second that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad you like it too, Richard.
Yeah, absolutely.
We have a nice comment here from Noelle. She says, I had no idea how fascinating Egypt was until I saw the introductory video. The Viking brochure states that we'll see 4 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, but it seems we'll see far more than that on this voyage. We can't wait to see this amazing part of the world on one of the beautiful new ships.
Oh, great.
Right?
Absolutely.
Next question comes from Alice in San Diego. She says, I love the idea of taking a hot air balloon ride over the pyramids. Is it possible to do this on this itinerary?
Yes, it is. Sorry, pyramids, not so much. We do it in Luxor. And the reason it's not done so much around the pyramids is that you're in a very large, very densely populated urban area.
Yeah.
Thank you. Next question, I think, for Richard is from Stephanie in Pasadena in the United States. She says, speaking of the upfront design process, how much of a percentage is allocated to trying to reflect the local flavour?
Yeah, so every ship that we look at, you certainly want to have some sense of where in the world you are. Now, all Viking ships are Viking ships, right? So they have that type of the design principles and things that I was speaking about earlier. But as you look around, there will be pieces of, there'll be materials, there'll be design references to places that you've been, all of these things that let you know for certain that you're very much, in Egypt and immersed into that world, while still enjoying the Viking culture. Now, I've always thought about, the prime element here is the destination. It's where we are, and that you want to go out and see all of that. And as you come back to the ship, it's like coming home. It's like coming back to a space where you can kind of relax, and you've still got the sense of where you are, but you're also in a place that you can rest and recharge and get ready to go out again tomorrow. So both is the answer.
Thank you. Next question is from James in Hilton Head Island. He asks, is the crew local to Egypt, or if not, which nationality are they?
The crew on all of our ships tends to be very multinational, if you will, from all over the world. But certainly there is a fairly large share of local crew, Egyptians. And most of the guiding is also done by local guides. Again, by Egyptians. I think I mentioned that in the presentation. The guides there are brilliant. They're all
Yes.
Egyptologists. They're very well educated and trained. They're just you know, I apologize, I repeat myself, but they're just such phenomenal guides. They really are.
I'd also say that every time I've been to Egypt, I am wildly impressed with the hospitable nature of the people and the people that you meet. It is ingrained into the culture, and it is one of the more friendly parts of the world. I've been, privileged to visit.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Kathy in Spring Hill in the United States says she's actually going to be traveling this itinerary alone. Will she feel included in all the activities?
Yes, of course. Yeah. We have not a huge share of our guests travel by themselves, but obviously we have quite a, we have people that do this, and I've never seen that as an issue. It's also the ship's size here is so nice, and Richard, I'm speaking on your behalf, but I do think that the way the ships are laid out, they do this where you can be on your own if you want, you can be in a group if you so desire as well, and so the ship is really conducive to having, if you will, small little serendipitous meetings. So yeah, I don't see it as an issue at all.
And in fact, I think I'd go even further. The thing that has amazed me the most, particularly about the longships, is the sense that people talk over and over again about how they've met good friends on board that stay good friends. It really is interesting. If you sit back from the architect's perspective and you watch how people are interacting with with your hotel, with your ship, with their holiday experience, it's fun. They'll start at the beginning, kind of they're by themselves. By the end, you've got lifelong friends and people that you're talking to and you really enjoy. And Joost, you're exactly right. The size and the intimacy of the ship is really what allows you to do that. So absolutely, I think it's a great place to go meet people, actually.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you very much. We have a couple of questions about visas. Teresa in Canada says, can we obtain the Egyptian and Jordan visas upon arrival at the airports?
Yes, the answer to that is yes, and that's really the easiest way to do it. Now, I know that you will have people that just want to get everything in order before they travel. My wife would want to do it that way, but you don't have to. You can. It's going to be a little bit more expensive if you do it up front because there's going to be a service fee, but it can all be done upon arrival at the airport. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Christine in the United States says, this trip looks so interesting, but do we need to be concerned about security in Egypt?
Richard, I would like to hear your take on it too, because we both spent time there. I've never really felt unsafe there. Traffic in Cairo is somewhat of a mess, but it's so slow that nothing bad ever happens to you. And other than that, no, I've never felt unsafe. No,
I haven't either. I have to say, and part of that is like I said, the hospitable nature of the country, and the fact that, quite honestly, it is Cairo particularly is a city built around tourism. So I've never gotten any at all worry about security or safety. No.
Great, thank you. Two questions from Noel and Angela, I think both in the United States. They would like to know, what is the best time of year to visit Egypt, in your opinion?
Oh, wow. Well, I can tell you, I have been there, I think, in almost every month out of the year. So every season has been there. And there are actually joys and delights to all of it. I remember spending a very wet, rainy day at a shipyard, which is really uncommon for Cairo. So I don't think so. I think there are different types of the year that offer different opportunities. I don't know, Joost, you're probably more attuned to the tourist season than I am, but I've never had a bad trip.
No, I mean, there are 2 months in the year, in June and in July, we use that time for a little bit of maintenance on the ship, so we don't offer very many cruises around that time, and that's when it gets really, really hot. It's a hot country, obviously, but no, I agree with you. It's never struck me as a particularly good or a bad time. If you travel there in January or in December, it gets very nippy at night.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I was also going to say, the outdoor space really does seem, if you think of it just as a hot country, you're kind of wondering, why are we doing all this exterior space? But literally, some of the most pleasurable times I've had have been sitting outside in the early evening, late afternoon, early evening is incredibly lovely experience.
Yeah. Mm.
Thank you. And that links to a question from Julie in Pasadena in the United States. She says, any tips on what to pack and what type of clothing is appropriate for this cruise?
Sure. Women in particular should make sure that they have things and it doesn't need to be anything very fancy, but a scarf to throw over your hair is a good thing. Bring shirts with sleeves or tops with sleeves. Long pants are good, and make sure that that you have some layers. Cotton. The Egyptians themselves, of course, this is the country where you want to go and buy some cotton items, because it's really kind of like, this is some of the best cotton in the world. Richard knows this better than I do, but loose fitting clothing. Make sure that when you visit a mosque or when you are in big crowds, it's probably a good thing to be covered appropriately.
I'd also add maybe it is a sandy environment once you get away from the Nile. So closed shoes probably better than sandals, just simply for the matter of worrying about the sand going everywhere. So
yeah.
And comfortable shoes. There are not a lot of paved sidewalks around 4,000-year-old monuments.
Thank you. Next question is from Piper in San Diego. So she says, what's the difference between the ships we described, so the Viking Osiris and the Viking Aton, and the Viking Ra?
Go ahead, Richard. Sorry.
No, I was going to say the Aton and the Osiris are virtually identical, so they are sister ships, and they do represent the full-on Viking experience as we've gone through. We have had an effort put into making other ships give you the Viking experience, but the full bore version is on the Osiris and the Aton.
Great, thank you. Sylvia in Hemet in the United States says, will we have the opportunity for a camel ride?
Yes.
Absolutely. Everywhere you could possibly want to.
Yes.
Lots of camels. Yeah.
Yes. We actually organize it near the pyramids, and it's not really a ride. It's more, it's an event.
It's a photo opportunity as well.
Yes. It's getting on and then stabilizing a little bit and then quickly getting off again. That's what it boils down to for most people.
It's fun. No, the camel ride's a good ride too. I mean, they have a nice steady gait to them. But
yes,
I was telling Joost earlier, one of my favorite experiences was seeing the security guards around the pyramids actually riding camels. They ride camels. They don't ride horses or motorbikes. They're on camels. It's kind of fun.
Great. Next question is from Tom in Los Angeles. He says, how much wider are the new Egypt ships compared to the European longships?
Yeah, good. Okay, don't ask me technical questions. I'll have to go look up in the drawings. But no, it is a wider ship than the longships. The longships are designed to fit very directly into several locks in the inter-European waterway. We don't have that problem here. So what we really did was start with what is the right cabin size, what is the right number of people, and the ship is designed around that. So it is a wider ship, and it's probably a more comfortable ship in that regard, that there's a bit more space around.
Great, thank you. And Susan in the United States says, how many people are on this cruise?
Yeah, it's I think 82 is the number. Am I remembering correctly, Joost?
I think so, yes. It's 82 or 84.
Yeah, I got it close.
Great, thank you. Deborah in the United States says, do you recommend visiting the large market in Cairo? What's it like?
No, I think
Richard?
I thought it was great fun.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Of course, I'm a guy who really loves to travel, and the opportunity to get out and experience every part of the culture is really great. The Old Town section of Cairo is totally an amazing experience. You definitely want to go try that.
Yeah, and I think I agree. It's kind of a must.
Yeah,
it's kind of a must. If you have Egyptian hosts, one thing I will tell: if you have Egyptian hosts, don't tell them that there's something you like, because they'll buy it for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
I
had to learn that the first time I was there with our partners in Cairo. I was like, oh, that is really cool. And instantly they bought it. And it happened another time. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to be really quiet because again, that's part of the culture.
Yes.
So great. Khan el-Khalili is great.
Thank you. And Noel says, in your spare time in Cairo when you're not on a tour, is it easy to find a great local guide, or will Viking recommend somebody if you wanted to do some more exploring?
We would recommend a local guide. Yes. Yeah. That's very doable. Yeah.
Thank you. A question have come in from Angela and also from Miki in Montclair. She asks, are mosquitoes an issue or bugs in Egypt?
Never really been bugged by that. Forgive the pun there. I don't remember that ever being an issue.
No.
Great, thank you. And another question from Miki. She's 89 and she says, would you recommend her as a woman to travel to Egypt? But of course, if she did, she would only go with Viking.
No. Absolutely. Well, I can say this: the ship is very comfortable and completely set up in a way that you could enjoy it to whatever level you wish to enjoy. Quite honestly, sitting on the deck and watching the Nile sail by is almost an experience in itself. I'd say go for it.
Yeah.
I hope that when I'm 89, that's what I'm doing. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I would add to that I think in general, it's, what we do, especially on the rivers and also on the ocean ships, the idea of having this having a space around you that travels with you, that feels a little bit like you come home. And that's even, to me, that's what our ships feel like. It's like you walk back onto the ship and you're like, oh, I'm home now. It really allows you to balance the amount of time that you spend exploring. And let's not kid ourselves. That's hard work sometimes. Yeah. And you can calibrate that, though. You can take a day where you take it a little easier, a little slower. And I just think that is really at the essence of what we do. It allows you to calibrate to your own needs how much exploring you do. And that's, yes, at 89, you should go to Egypt. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Question from Richard in Bowie in the United States. He says, is there traffic when docking at ports, like sometimes on the European rivers?
Traffic when docking at ports on the European, you mean a lot of ships lined up in a row? Is that, I guess, is the question?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, you're certainly going to get that, but don't forget the Nile is a very big river. I mean, it's very wide, and there is a lot of room in Cairo, and a lot of room in the docks that we use. I don't see it as being quite as crammed together as you might find like in Amsterdam or someplace like that. I haven't had that experience.
No, I would agree. But there are ships that dock next to each other. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
But you're right. In Egypt, I've never experienced that as an issue.
No. Traffic on the streets, as you were saying earlier, yes, yeah, that's a thing, but not on the river.
Thank you. Karen in Lawrence in the United States says, in terms of changing Egyptian money, what do you recommend?
I would get some from an ATM. Maybe bring a little bit, but you really don't need a lot. Maybe bring a little bit as you start out. But I'm fairly certain that each of the hotels that you stay in Cairo will have an ATM machine, so or an exchange desk. I would always do it with an 8 because it's the easiest. You can kind of take as much as you need. That's how I would go about it.
Thank you. Question from Rebecca in the US. She says, is there a must-do excursion which is not one of the included ones? So I think she's asking, which of the optionals would you say is a must-do?
That's a hard one. I think there are okay. So Abu Simbel is probably the one that I would absolutely recommend. That's the one.
Yeah. Clearly.
Yeah. And others you can do or you can leave them. I think this is a program where everything that is important to see is already included. Yeah. With the exception of Abu Simbel, and that has to do with the fact, it's expensive. You need to fly there. It's not for everyone. So.
Thank you. Next question is from Roy in Red Wing in the United States. He says, do we need special permits to take photographs in the monuments and temples?
In some places, you still have these little, you pay $1 to get a little ticket. But it's very limited, and it's very easy. It's not a biggie at all. Again, I said this before. I think carry some small change, and that will generally take care of everything.
Thank you. Judith in the United States says, could you tell us a bit about how the excursions are for people who need a little help walking? Is this suitable?
It depends. I think there are some excursions where you spend a fair amount of time on a coach, and then there are those where you may want to do a little bit of extra walking. And as Richard pointed out, most of these monuments are ancient, and not all of them are that accessible. So you would need to pace yourself a little bit.
Thank you, Joost. A question from Ruth in the United States. She says, are the guides independent or trained by the government? In the 90s, the guides were government trained and delivered the official government information only.
No, they're trained with Viking. They are across. You will find opinions across the political spectrum. So no, you will not hear people just kind of deliver the official government line. They're very open people. I have found that you can ask questions about pretty much anything, as long as you do it in a respectful fashion. People have no issue with probing questions if you so choose.
Thank you, Joost. And I think this is the last question for today. It's from Cynthia, and she just asks, do we need to learn a bit of the local language?
I know nothing of an Egyptian, I'm sorry. And I've made it just fine, so I don't know. But Joost, I don't know, you probably have a better sense than I do.
Hello and thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
And people will get an enormous kick out of that.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's it, because more than that, it's not necessary. No. People generally speak a little bit of English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never had it be an issue that I don't speak Arabic.
That's great. Thank you both so much. I think that's all the questions that came in tonight. So I'll leave it with you guys to sign off.
Lovely. Thank you all. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you.
Thanks, Richard. That was great. We should do it again.
Always at your convenience, whenever. Happy to. Look forward to seeing you in Cairo.
All right.
Okay. Thank you.